We are so thrilled to welcome our next guest to the Kelly Alexander Show. He is a household name in the world of dance, having worked with the likes of Madonna, Lenny Kravitz, Ricky Martin, and Vogue, TLC, Lady Gaga, and of course, his long-time relationship with Michael Jackson. Travis Payne has received numerous awards, including 4 MTV Video Music Awards for choreography, and we are very happy to talk to him about his illustrious career and also the 20th anniversary of Michael and Janet Jackson's groundbreaking Scream video, which he was a part of. Travis, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here. My pleasure.
So, Travis, I want to start off. I want to bring you back. I like to do that with my guests. I want to ask you how dance actually came into your life.
Ooh, good one. Well, I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia, and I remember seeing, the Nutcracker, when we go on school trips, and I always thought it was so cool, like the guys would fly through the air, and so I started to study ballet, tap, and jazz at Norma's Academy in Atlanta, and then of course I was spellbound by seeing Michael Jackson and his brothers on Motown 25. And that's what sort of did it for me, seeing Michael perform and seeing, the kind of mix of what looked like ballet, jazz, tap, funk, and street dance all at the same damn time. And that's what really got me into it. And also seeing things like Solid Gold, which was a TV show hosted by Dionne Warwick that featured dancers performing the top 40 songs every week. That was really what did it for me. I was 8 years old.
Now, did you figure out sort of at 8 that this was it, like your career would go down that path?
I knew I loved it and I knew it was my passion. I felt like it was my calling. And yeah, at an early age, I knew that dance would be in my life. And it wasn't until, I got into dance companies like Gary Harrison Dance Company in Atlanta when I was 14 years old and worked with Michael Peters for the Coca-Cola Centennial. At that time, Thriller was huge. And, I saw that dance could be a career, because all I'd known until that time is that you grow up, you're in a company, you go to New York, you get in Alvin Ailey or Dance Theater of Harlem. I didn't know about the commercial world, i.e. music videos and tours and things like that, but then I saw the Bad Tour and I saw Michael with male dancers and it was just so powerful. They were like superheroes. And that's when it all clicked for me that I had to work with him and I had to be near him. And as fate would have it, I got the opportunity to go to LA and, work with Janet first, which is where I met Anthony Thomas.
Can you actually talk to us about that? Would you sort of say that was your first big break, the Janet job?
Oh, for sure. Janet Jackson's Rhythm Nation, Michael Jackson's Smooth Criminal, Thriller. At that time, also Paul Abdul, Madonna, Debbie Allen, Prince. I was just obsessed with all of them because of the marriage of dance and music. And getting to go to LA after I met a gentleman named Frank Gatson Jr., who came behind stage at a production I was in Atlanta when I was in high school. And, he was telling me that, he knew LaBelle Smith Jr., who was already on tour with Janet and, had been one of the guys I saw performing with Michael in the Bad Tour, and I had looked up to LaBelle even long before I knew him. So just sort of the universe aligned and put those gentlemen in my life. And I found myself shortly after that replacing Anthony, who had at the time been with Janet for about a decade, and all throughout her creative process for the Rhythm Nation album. He was one of her choreographers and creative directors. And, he went on to do other things. And he and I talked about this a little while ago. And he told me that, it had been such a long journey for him. He was ready to, sort of turn the page, which opened a spot for me to submit a videotape of myself doing all of Janet's choreography because I'd been to 10 of her concerts as a fan. And, I sent this videotape to her, and within a week I was leaving to go meet the show in Japan. And that's how sort of my touring career started, with Janet Jackson, responding to a videotape that I sent to her through LaBelle.
Now, I have to ask you about Rhythm Nation, especially because, we just sort of crossed into its 25th anniversary. And
Yes.
I was fortunate to be able to interview Anthony and Interview Tina and Interview Lavelle and Terry Bixler and Jimmy Locust, who were all a part of that project, and some of them were on the tour. And
Yes.
speaking to you now, knowing you were on the tour, in the Asian part of the tour and so on, I have to ask you, 25 years later, how important still is that album, and what was it like for you being a part of that, tour? Because it definitely changed, I think, the world of dance and the way things were done.
Oh, for sure. The Rhythm Nation project as a whole was just a monster. It was revolutionary. I mean, up until that time, we had only had, Michael to look to for these amazing films that were set to music. And, Janet, I suppose, having been influenced by her brothers for so many years, was able to put her own twist on the genre. And, many people when I tell them, are very fascinated to know that Rhythm Nation was her first tour. She had put out albums before, but she marketed herself, and her team marketed her through music videos, short films, and I think it was quite genius because it she was in her element whenever you saw her. And I remember growing up looking at these films every morning before school. I had to watch Miss You Much and Rhythm Nation and Knowledge, the trilogy. And, it was just a sort of way of life for many of us at that time because it was the answer to, what had been missing. It made what we had seen with Michael, which was really also almost sort of unattainable because it was so magical and on such a high level. Janet made it inclusive. She made it possible for people to learn the steps. You want it to be part of the Rhythm Nation. You want it to feel like you belonged. And she spoke to a lot of that, in her music. And they both did. But I know that for Janet, we were closer in age, and I could see and follow, her career and know sort of the obstacles that she had overcome, being in the shadows of her brothers. So when she finally came out with her own sort of vibe and created her own brand, we were all there to witness it. And I remember all the time dancing with Michael, to the Rhythm Nation and Knowledge. He loved those pieces. And Jimmy Jim and Terry Lewis being some of his favorite producers, he just loved it. He loved what it all meant, and he would always tell you, Janet saw Captain EO and she asked me if I could do, if she could do, borrow the military concept. But she hit it out of the park with that one. That was good, So it resonated, and I think that it was a perfect timing for the music and the visuals from Rhythm Nation.
As someone who has been so involved in music for over 20 years now, and seeing the progression, and obviously you even working not that long ago with Lady Gaga on her Monster Ball tour, if Rhythm Nation was released in 2015, do you think it would be as successful as it was back in 1989?
I definitely do, because if you look at the messages that are in both Michael's and Janet's songs, they're very, very relevant today. With all the civil unrest that we have around the world, with all of the sort of socioeconomic divide that we're experiencing firsthand as a society. When you think of the lyrics, ignorance, no, bigotry, no. I mean, they were saying things back then that are so important and timeless that they definitely resonate now. And I think that it'd be great to hear a Knowledge, Rhythm Nation remake, Earth Song remake, a Heal the World remake, because those songs and the messages contained in them are just so poignant and timeless. And I think they were ahead of their time and completely relevant today.
Joining us on the show is award-winning choreographer Travis Payne, who has worked with just about every A-list recording artist, including his friend Michael Jackson. Make sure to check out his website, travispayne.net. Travis, a lot of us became acquainted with you once you started working with Michael specifically. And you've already sort of touched upon Michael, and I do want to talk more about your relationship with him. But you've also done, as I mentioned off the top, you've worked with so many other people, En Vogue, Madonna, Lenny Kravitz, the list goes on and on, Lady Gaga, recently. With those other people, who stands out to you? Because again, I know everyone wants to ask you about Michael and Janet, but who else, stood out to you, in a special way that we might not think about when it comes to you?
Well, there were a few. I mean, Madonna, obviously, because I grew up watching her. and then being around her and seeing her process and, her being this resilient trendsetter and continuing to be is definitely inspiring. I really enjoyed working with Beyonce. We did a campaign for L'Oreal, and she was she had yet to release her first solo album, and you could tell she had it. That thing, that unteachable thing that many of the greats are born with. And likewise, Lady Gaga she was very different when she came out. There were flashes of Madonna there. You know, there were flashes of like Europop. There were flashes of punk rock. But she, I think, was very unique at the time she came out. And for instance, when we were putting together This Is It and creating a short list of people who would join Michael on stage for various shows and various songs within This Is It, we had a list, and it was, obviously Dinah Ross and Janet and Justin Timberlake and Usher and Michael's brothers, etc. But when I asked him, is this everybody? He said, and Lady Gaga. And I
Wow.
thought, really? Okay, why? And he said, well, she's next. She's cool. And I said, all right. So, back then in 2009, for him to recognize the wonderful career she had ahead of her, I think was pretty, pretty substantial, coming from Michael Jackson at that time in his career. And
Travis, yep.
so our experience with her was really cool. I mean, she was a hard worker, tireless, and really dedicated to her craft. An artist, not a pop creation. So I definitely respect that about her.
Travis, how would you describe your style and of choreography? And did you have to make adjustments for how your style melded with Michael's?
I think that my style before meeting Michael was certainly, kind of mixture of ballet, jazz, and modern. And when I started working with Michael, there were more street elements like popping and locking and tutting and, these styles of dance that I'd only seen, the B-boys in New York do, but Michael sort of revamped and repurposed many of those shapes in a slicker, sort of more performable way, if that makes sense. A lot of those battle moves he turned into really graceful, elegant performance moves. And so I learned a lot in those early years, working closely with he and Lavelle at that time. And so for me, it was just the natural progression. When I remember going to my first audition in Los Angeles, and Jennifer Lopez was right next to me. She was still a dancer. And I remember being in more of a sort of ballet modern vibe, very sort of pulled up, in like a bike suit or something tight, But all of the guys at that time were starting to wear combat boots and, pajama bottoms and loose fitting things and more grounded, So that was something I had to get used to, but, later came to love and adapt into my own style of movement creation and performance. And so, certainly influenced by all of those things. And I continue to be inspired and influenced by things I see.
We are celebrating the 20th anniversary of Michael and Janet's Scream, the song, the video, which was such a prolific piece of work.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, not only for the fans, but I think for other artists. Because I remember actually interviewing Cece Peniston not that long ago, and
Mm.
she mentioned that she was already an established artist, and at that time, because she blew up in the early '90s, and
Yeah.
she said to me, she said, when Scream came out, she's like, I went running home. She's like, because there was no like PVR back then. You had to be there. And
Oh, yeah.
I thought it was interesting for someone who was a big hit in the '90s and a '90s artist, and she said that, and then I wanted to know how you were actually brought onto the project and what your role was, because we know that there was four of you involved. There was you, there was Tina Landon, Sean Cheeseman, and Lavelle Smith, all important
Yes.
parts of the puzzle. So how did it come together for you to be a part of Scream?
Well, at the time we were in the midst of the history era, it was time for Michael and Janet to do something together. They never had. Tina and Sean were part of Janet's team, and of course, Lavelle and I were a part of Michael's team. And so when the idea came along, we knew that it would be historic and groundbreaking, but there would be some serious scheduling to do because they were both so busy and had projects going on. So we rehearsed in LA. Janet had one location, and Michael had one location. And so for some time, I went back and forth between the two locations, driving my little car and rehearsing in the different places, sharing ideas, so the three of us would create something, and then I'd drive over and show it to Janet and her team, and Tina and Sean would show us something they did. Then I'd learn it and drive back to show it to Michael and Lavelle, and then we'd make some changes to it. Then I'd drive back and show them. Then they'd make changes. Then I'd drive back. So it was a lot of time spent on the 101 freeway at that time for me, but I loved it and wouldn't change it. And so then when it was finally time to come together, we went into Screenland Studios in Burbank and had a great time. And then we moved to the Backlot at Universal Studios to work with Mark Romanek. And we filmed it for at least 10 days. And it was kind of an around the clock process because we were shooting a movie. And both artists had different, desires as far as the rehearsal hours and the surface of the floor. Michael liked it slick, Janet not so much. They liked different types of lighting. So if you stood on our set and looked down it looked like a left side and a right side, to the naked eye. But in the movie, it all was this wonderful futuristic finish, and it just looked pristine and perfect, just custom furniture from Italy. And, it was the first time I worked on a gimbal set. It was massive. And, just to be working and creating at that high level was just like it was a dream come true. Janet, who had given me my start, and Michael, who was my, idol, to be working with them both on the set and see them, perform together doing, steps that I contributed to. It was a dream come true for me, being a little kid from Atlanta with hopes of, one day working with them both, and it came true.
Did you have to, or did you have feelings when you were on the set of almost wanting to pinch yourself, knowing like that you were a part of history?
Oh, definitely. I wanted to be in the video. Okay, I had my little plastic outfit on too every day, hoping they say, "Okay, come on in here and do this part." But I I wanted to, I wanted to have my little spiky shirt. I wanted to be in the film because I knew that we were doing something special. And aside from the fact that it was, the most expensive piece of its kind, to date, um, and all of the brilliant artists who came together for the piece. It was just special. Everything about it was special. And, it remains one of my favorite projects that I ever was involved in.
As you mentioned, you had already worked with Janet sort of years before on a Rhythm Nation tour, and then you were obviously at that time working closely with Michael. What would you say was the biggest difference and the biggest similarity between these two superstars who just happened to be siblings, as you were working on the Scream project?
I think their processes are different, you know, similar but different in that, Janet loves, they both love the rehearsal, but Janet is consistent. She will do, she'll create a piece of choreography with her team and she'll execute it the same way. Michael would like to create a piece of choreography, as a bed, a bed of information. But then he would go off and, riff and improvise within it, and he liked to have that kind of freedom, especially at that time. But I think their similarities were, quite obvious. I mean, the way they moved, the appreciation they had for each other's talent, the need they had to bring about social change and equality, all over the world, in their music, in their imagery, in their lyrics, in their dances, I think, you know, is undeniable. And, I think just their appreciation of the art form, of creating music videos or short films. as we call them, knowing that they were creating timeless pieces, for generations to come, is just some of the things that come to mind for me.
For the fans that are listening right now, because we're fortunate here on the Kelly Alexander Show to have a lot of Janet fans, a lot of Michael fans that like to listen, because we obviously respect those two artists quite a bit here on the show and like to talk about their history. What would you say to the fans that are listening right now who wish to hell they had been on the set with you? Like, what do you want them to know that maybe they didn't know watching the behind the scenes on MTV?
Well, I want their fans to know that it was just wonderful. It was so great to see these two siblings, you know, um, work together and love each other and support each other and really have a mutual respect for each other. Just to see how lighthearted they were and how happy they were to have the opportunity to work together in this way, to sort of let us in, you know, to their union, to their bond. There's nothing like a brother and a sister, and certainly Michael and Janet were very special in that regard. And, many people don't know that there were several sets that we didn't even get to film on because of time. But there were some awesome sets that were built on the Universal backlot that we just didn't get to film. And they would have definitely added a lot more value to screen. But I think it's perfect, as it is. But, what if, we had gotten to film on those sets, and how that would have affected people too. I remember being on the set of a TLC video shortly after that for No Scrubs, and it was such a homage to Scream. And I just see how the short film continues to inspire artists and their styling and the vibe, even today.
Now, not long after Michael passed away in 2009, Janet was asked to perform at the MTV Video Music Awards to honor her brother Michael, and she did perform Scream, as we all know. You were a part of that elite group of choreographers who danced along with her. People like Tina Landon, Tice, Diorio, Brian Friedman, Chris Judd. The list goes on. First of all, who gave you the call to join that group, to join that performance? And what did it feel like to honor Michael in this way so soon after his passing? Because it was only a few months.
Well, Gil called me to see if I'd be interested in participating. And during that time, we were editing This Is It. And, I obviously was in a very melancholy, sad place. It was being able to be involved in This Is It that, you know, uh, after Michael's passing was my sort of it was my mourning period, like everybody around the world. It was definitely especially hard for me because, just a few short weeks before, we had been preparing for what would be the biggest tour in the history of, popular music. But, we all know what happened, and, you know, he was no longer with us physically. So at that time, it was about honoring his legacy, with the editing of the documentary and the outreach to his fans and all of the things that followed, his memorial and funeral. So to get the call to join Janet on stage, was like a full circle moment for me. Of course, I obliged and was honored to be asked, and it was a little distraction. And I say that in the most loving way, but to be sitting in front of the editing bay for hours and hours and hours, 7 days a week, it was a welcome change to go and celebrate Michael and honor him in a different way, with Janet, and leave LA, go to New York, you know. And so those, I think, 5 days or so that I got to be away from editing was needed. I got to recharge in a way so that I went back, to the edit with fresh eyes and, a different perspective on what I felt my contribution to the This Is It documentary should be. So I welcomed it, and it was a beautiful moment, and it was great to be there with Janet, and to pray for Michael and to honor him in that way, and I'm just glad I was able to do it.
Can you take yourself back for a second, Travis, to that moment just before you guys sort of busted out onto the MTV stage? Because you guys, everybody that follows dance knows that that was such an elite group of choreographers that were supporting Janet. Were you guys nervous? What was the tone? What was the mood?
Yes, I mean, I think it was a bittersweet moment. Clearly, we were all glad to be there, but the reason we were there, had everybody a little heavier than we may have ordinarily been, but for the fact that Michael passed, I don't know if that group would ever have been assembled. So, there was definitely bittersweet there. Um, Janet was a trooper. She led us through the experience brilliantly, and we could all feel her love and appreciation for us and her brother and what his legacy means, to her and the world. So it was definitely a special moment that I'll always remember and cherish. And she did me the honor of allowing me to lead the prayer for the group before the performance. Which again was one of those blessings that you'd have to be there to experience.
I understand that Janet offered you guys the opportunity to keep your performance outfit. From that moment, how special was that for you to have that? And is it in your house? Like, is it framed? Is it in like a vault?
Oh, I have my outfit, in the plastic, in the original plastic it was delivered to us in, and of course the shoes I love, and they're in my dressing room, and I wore them maybe a couple of times after that, but I won't wear them anymore because I want them to remain pristine, but I keep all of my costumes and apparel from those times, and from the tours, anything I'm able to keep. I mean, I had so much memorabilia, because it has such sentimental value to me, and I'll never part with it, but especially that one because of what it means.
Now, it's been just about 6 years since Michael's passing. And I know that for me, I'm a radio announcer, and, sometimes, we'll have a Michael Jackson song that comes on. And all of a sudden, like for me, as someone who doesn't know him, and obviously you were good friends with him, like it still takes me by surprise that he's gone. Like I still have to remind myself sometimes that both he and Whitney are gone. Have you come to terms with the fact that he's gone, or is it still sort of fresh and it sort of takes you by surprise every now and again?
No, it's definitely still a challenge. I know that God doesn't make mistakes. Michael was a very spiritual person, and I think that the beautiful thing about it is that his legacy is just so important and so imprinted, in all of our consciousness, that I think it's okay. I mean, I'll never get used to the fact that he's not here, physically, but I believe that he's around. I believe that he's with me. Experiences like this, to be able to talk about him, just remind me of how much he continues to mean to me in my life, and in my development as an artist, and an educator of future generations, with regards to dance and music and entertainment. You know, I do my best to carry the torch, to represent his legacy, in my own way. He has his family, his children, who definitely continue to remind us of his brilliance, but just to be able to contribute to his legacy in my way is an honor. And, I just, I sometimes feel his presence, especially, in moments where I'm not sure or I'm questioning myself. I just, have a quiet moment and I ask myself, what would he think? How would he feel about this? What would he get out of this experience? How would he feel this moment creatively could have the most lasting impact? And sometimes I get little signs like, I'll just flip the page, or I'll be walking by something and I'll see an image of him, or I'll get into an elevator and I'll hear his music, or I'll just be flipping through the radio and one of his songs is on, or, just there are little signs that I notice that I like to think um, are the universe putting in front of me moments, that will calm me. And I'm really grateful, to Michael for everything he's done for me and the blessings that continue to come my way because of my rapport with him over the years. And he's my mentor. He was my idol from the time I was a child. So it will always be my pleasure to represent him in the best way I know how.
I don't think anybody will argue with me when I say that, you are such a talent. You've achieved so much. I have to ask you what goals are left, for Travis Payne because obviously you're so young still. You've got so much ahead of you. What do you want to conquer? Because you've already done dance, you've done film, you've done ad campaigns. Like, where is Travis Payne's heart right now?
Well, I am. Well, first of all, thank you for the lovely words. Uh,
It's
but
true. It's true.
well, thank you. I'm focusing on giving opportunities to others, inspiring the younger generations as Michael and Janet did for me. I have a line of apparel and shoes that I've launched, Travis Payne Apparel. I've created some dance shoes that I really really love, and they were actually Michael's idea. He knew that I loved shoes, and one of the things we were doing for This Is It was creating new shoes for him, so that we could retire the penny loafer.
Nice.
So he saw how much I enjoyed that process, and he said, you should do your own shoes. So I took direction and have been working very hard on them with the Runic company out of Italy. And so we've now got shoes for sale, um, at travispayneapparel.com. And so I'm excited about that, as well as, moving into producing television. And I'm gearing up to direct my first feature film, as well as working on an educational program that will be in Asia and the US, and ultimately a school, entertainment production facility. I manage a few artists, Jung Suk, B-Boy Hearth, who's now part of MJ1, and you know, continue to just work with artists and inspire them, and continue to be fed by them. And I just love all things artistic, and that's sort of where my passion lies now. Finding out what my next chapter is, and what is my life after MJ, and how do I continue to stay inspired about what I'm doing and reinvent certain aspects of myself, to stay relevant and you know, um, to stay influential. So that's really my passion these days.
Well, we want to thank you so much for spending time with us because if I can sort of take the responsibility for a second and sort of speak on behalf of Janet fans, on behalf of Michael fans, you're such an amazing choreographer, such an amazing dancer. I think they were very fortunate to have you around and do what you do. So thank you so much for spending time with us, and we'd love for you to come back on the show anytime you want.
It is my pleasure so much, and I thank you, Kelly, and all your fans and listeners, and Michael's and Janet's supporters. I mean, I love you. I appreciate you. I thank you, and it's my honor. And I'd love to come back and visit you again.
Excellent. That is award-winning choreographer Travis Payne. Again, make sure to check out his website, travispayne.net.